Hi, I'm the Space Quest historian, and welcome to an audio commentary on the remix album Gabriel Knight, Synths of the Fathers. Silly, stupid fucking pun. Which the origin of the album was actually me writing to John Paul, the guy who mixed it, saying, you know what we should do? We should do a Gabriel Knight remix album, and we should call it Synths of the Father. And he wrote me back saying, that's stupid. Let's do it. So with me is none other than the original composer of the Gabriel Knight soundtrack, whose work we have now mangled, Mr. Robert Holmes. Good evening, sir.
Hello.
I'm very, very honored and happy to have you along for this hour and 15-minute long ride through what I imagine is going to be quite the heartbreaking journey.
Thanks for having me. And, you know, by the way, I have not met anyone who didn't love that pun. Everybody I've ever shared it with just, oh my God, that title's so great. It's hysterical. So
Thank you.
I think it's on the money.
Yeah. Josh Mandel suggested if we ever do Gabriel Knight 2, we should call it The Beats Within.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're actually going to...
The big vegetable now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to listen to the whole thing, and we're going to have a chat. Hopefully, you can share some interesting tidbits about the music, the original music that was made, and I can tell you how we utterly annihilated it. So let's just start off with the main theme. Yes. The telltale tubular bell that goes off. That
General MIDI bell.
Yes. This is the DAW that I use is Mixcraft by Acoustica, and they have a built-in sound library that's more or less based off the General MIDI standard, and this is their generic tubular bell.
Nice.
But the weird little angry synth wow that comes in on the first beat is also the tubular bell, or the tubular bell stem, so to speak, just with some weird synth popped in.
Very cool. Yeah, you know, the main theme was the first tune I wrote for GK. Mm-hmm. It's about all I remember about it, but
well,
I remember playing. I remember playing it for Jane and Mark Hood, thinking they would, you know, just fall over, super impressed and love it, and they were kind of like, "Oh yeah, okay, that's great."
It's not terribly impressed. Right. So, what a lot of people think is the main theme for Gabriel Knight, the opening tubular bell and these quiet strings, actually goes into, if you let the main menu sit long enough, goes into this bit that's coming up, which I always assumed is the proper main theme, and the other thing was just an intro. So what is the proper main theme to Gabriel Knight? Is it the leitmotif, or is it?
You know, it's. I always think about it as that main melody. Which actually, if you listen to it, like a lot of my GK stuff, it actually kind of lyrically says, like, in Gabriel Knight. It's very phonic like that.
Yeah, I never noticed that. This piano thing that's going on here. This is what I would consider the main theme.
Yeah, for me, this is like a B section.
Okay.
You know, I think a lot of people really latch onto this because it's got the drama.
It's got the drama, and it's got the 7/8 time, which is
that's right.
Which is interesting to program dance drums for. You can't really dance to 7/8.
You know, and that was the gating factor for Genesis' career. I think was that, you know, they're making all this amazing 7/8 music, and nobody could dance to it.
And this is transitioning into a different part of the main theme. Again, if you leave it on the main menu for long enough, it is a fairly long piece. But I think I mushed two MIDI files together for this. So the thing that's coming up now is a different MIDI file.
So funny, because you had kind of so much fun with a lot of this. It takes me a while to actually figure out what it is.
Yeah, this bit doesn't sound... I mean, the bass that's playing is
I can hear
the bass that you programmed. And actually, the bass work, a lot of that gets lost, particularly if you play the game with an OPL, with the Sound Blaster. But the bass work is actually really, really interesting. It's not just, the tonic rock bass that just goes underneath. It's got all these little flourishes that unfortunately get drowned out a bit.
No, I've had some. In fact, my best friend growing up, who I played in a lot of bands with, was this amazing bassist, and so I had a lot of influence being around really good bass players, which I am not. I'm like an okay bass player. That definitely set the standard for me whenever I do anything to try and actually create a decent part.
Yeah. Yeah, a good bass line can really own a song. I mean, my bass playing is limited to, just do the tonic and just hope your finger doesn't slip kind of thing. But, I mean, this has a rhythm to it.
Sting always said, when I was working with him, he used to say, the reason he took up bass was because the bass player really owns the harmonic structure of everything and can change it on the dime.
Yes,
which is true.
I mean, if you watch the Who play, the bass player's just standing up there. His arm is going up and down that fretboard.
Oh man, in Whistle, he was amazing.
Yes. So this piano thing that's going on is also considered the main theme. I don't know if is it the same chord progression as the thing we had before?
Yeah, I think it is. One is kind of in halftime, and this is in full time.
Yeah,
which I cheat that way quite often. For me, this is the main melody.
Yeah. And this is the one that gets reused in the St. George's books, but in a more sort of mellow version.
Right.
And now we drop down, and now we're going to kick back into the 7/8-bit again. And it's interesting because when John Paul was mixing this, he sort of went, "Where's the choir? Where's the strings? Where's everything like in the last bit there? It sounds kind of empty." And I was like, "Nah, dude, it's supposed to be a big old punch in the face." And he's going, "Oh, I get you." I love that bit. I love that. I even had to go out and find a Sound Canvas VST for this because you use the what is it, the Fantasia or whatever it's called.
Oh yeah.
Patch, and it just nothing I tried sounded as good as that did.
I still like, even working on this new album, I still use. 12 has a couple of great patches that are combination piano strings or piano with choir, and it's just enough to sort of give the piano more depth and interest. And I always sort of start there and then layer on from there.
Oh yeah, Gary Newman does the same thing. In fact, his producer had to beat him over the head to get him to stop using the same keyboard patch.
It's also a crutch for those of us who aren't actually piano players, because you don't have to worry about sustain as much.
Oh, well, actually, that's an interesting thing to talk about. So your main instrument is the guitar, right?
That's right. Yep. Really consider myself a guitarist, and it's probably where my real passion goes, though obviously I'm passionate about synths and stuff now, but at the end of the day, that's my main instrument.
Well, that's interesting because all of the Gabriel Knight games rely so heavily on the piano. The piano is like the main instrument.
Yeah, it's. I mean, part of that I think was because of the dynamic that we had in this with the tools that were available.
Sound Canvas guitar sounds like crap.
Yeah. They just it was years before there was really a decent way to do guitar stuff, and of course Neil Flagstaff ended up doing some great stuff with those tools. But I've always, as a songwriter, I've always written on both. I've always written stuff on guitar and I've written stuff on piano, and it's just kind of leaned into that one corner more often than not.
Here's another example of a very, very, very good bass line that unfortunately gets buried a bit when you play the game, because in the game, this is the map screen of New Orleans, and it just starts full on because it's the map screen. You're only there for like 30 seconds or something. But the bass line is just so good. I had to start this remix with just the bass line and just a simple beat.
Yeah, I think with this kind of stuff, I was probably influenced. If you go back and listen to some of the main themes from 70s TV shows, there's a lot of this kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, I can hear that.
The theme from Mannix and Mod Squad and stuff.
Yeah. And this has a nice chill vibe to it as well. I mean, it sounds like a busy metropolis, but in a sort of laid back way. So I think it's because it's all in major chords, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's got this happy, jovial kind of party vibe to it, but in a laid back kind of way. I actually played this live at the Danish Game Awards. This was the track that I put in.
Wow.
Because it's so it's mellow in a way. Now, this trumpet solo. What happened?
Yeah, this is kind of a split homage to Penny Lane and trumpet players from Tower of Power who used to take off and do solos like that. So these really high, incredibly precise. If you listen to the solo, which is not a trumpet, it's actually another instrument. I can't think of the name. In Penny Lane, it's like killer. It just grabs your ear, and it's very uber musical.
Yeah.
It's also the kind of thing a non-keyboard player can play in a fun way on a synth.
I was just thinking, because there's a lot of really fast notes. I mean, how do trumpet players even physically do that?
Oh man, a good trumpet player. I spent a lot of years playing in a big brass band, and we did a lot of Tower of Power and Chicago and stuff like that. And those guys, there's nothing like that feeling of having a 5-piece horn section behind you when they cut loose, man.
Oh, better be wearing earplugs. But this is, I mean, the only thing I did was change it into a synth trumpet, because it's supposed to be a little synthy, so it sounds more like a keyboard solo now. But I mean, that must have been fun, because you recorded all the stuff live on a keyboard.
Yep.
So that you must have been going like like that.
That's right.
And that's actually, I really liked going through the MIDI files. I've said this before, because you can tell from the way it's played, there's very little quantization. It's all, I mean, all the note velocities are humanized. Like, they're not evenly distributed. They're not step enter.
So that's a very genteel way to describe how messy they are. I just, even now, I really don't like to hear stuff quantized. And I think I grew up so much on early rock and roll and things from the 50s and 60s, and some of the charm of that stuff is the mistakes and the way something is slightly ahead of the beat or slightly behind the beat, and so I'm a big advocate for that.
Which is all the more surprising that you're on board with a like really heavily quantized dance remix of your album.
Well, you know, in that genre, I mean, it's totally makes sense when you need that precision, you know.
If you play a drum machine on a keyboard, which I have done, it's and you sort of get off beat, and then you hand it over to someone like John Paul, whose job it is to beef everything up and make it punch through, and you hear stuff that's offbeat. I mean, these because you said on one of Roberta's live streams that you really like when you can tell that stuff has been played by a human. That's why we started adding live drums and live guitar and stuff. And yet I still had to get in and quantize the shit out of it because when it was playing alongside program beats, it just sounded sloppy. So these are live drums played on a shitty little Yamaha drum pad.
Nice.
Actually, wait a minute. I can show you. So this guy.
Oh yeah, those are great.
These are the drums that we're listening to right now. Oh, it turns this way.
Very cool.
And it's and the pads are something else, because if you hit a pad that's close to like the hi-hat and the snare, sometimes they can't quite figure out which one is, so you have to go in and edit the MIDI data afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Sort of.
That's cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know, this is one of the tunes I still actually enjoy hearing. Some of them, you know, are not, but this one for some reason still just.
Yeah, the crime scene, which is also one of my favorites, because it's a little spooky and a little ominous, but also you kind of get the sense that Gabe is like just sort of waltzing in like he owns the place. And it's got that sort of 70s cop show vibe to it also.
Now this bass line actually comes from a band I was in like 1974, and a tune that we did, which that tune was actually kind of more of a David Bowie early Genesis thing. But for some reason, you know, I had never used it. I decided to use it.
And it's used twice in the game. This is the interrogation. And later when you get into the Hound 4 and you distract Dr. John, the same music plays. Is there a reason why this piece of music is used for those two scenes?
Well, you know, I think the majority of the music in UK1, you know, is relatively subconscious pop. You know, it's not incredibly dramatic. The main theme and maybe this and maybe one or two other things. So, you know, that scene needed so much tension, and for some reason, you know, I just thought it was appropriate to take this again.
Yeah, it does this sort of build, and it's in 7/8 time again.
There you go.
But it's so much fun to play the drums to, as you can tell. I kind of went a little overboard on the fills, but it was just.
If I don't know if you've ever heard Chris Squire's solo album.
Can't say that I have.
It's really, really good. You know, early progressive stuff, and he does a lot of tunes like this that are all about the bass line in 7/8. Definitely influenced me.
Lovely. But also the chords themselves have this sort of. I mean, it sounds like it's all going. It's all in the same key all the way through.
Yep.
Except it just keeps
I mean, it's really one chord that's just moving up.
Yeah.
Different inversions. The drums you got in are adding some great interest, which is cool.
Thank you. It was just fun, and it goes on for a bit, admittedly. but it was just so much fun to play along to. So I just kept going. And this track is the medley that we ended up calling Eyes of the Snake, because it more or less tells the story of Crash, the unhappy voodoo acolyte turned in form. Yeah, he just gets the short end of this thing, and he's one of my favorite bit characters in the game, just by virtue of being such a fucking idiot.
Yeah, there were several artists on the team, the GK team, that there were heavy rumors about who Crash was based on, and several of them probably could indeed have been the basis, I think.
Well, he certainly has a mouth on him. I remember being a giddy little teenager and playing through Gabriel Knight, and the first time I heard the F-bomb drum, I was like, ooh, oh, oh, oh. Not something you normally got with adventure games of the time.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
This solo is actually the song's bass line, played a couple of octaves up. And it's I got a message from someone saying, "Oh, I like the solo you played on the end of of this track." I said, "I didn't play it. Rob did."
Yeah, that bass line to a great degree just came because another one of those specific patches that we had on the sound canvas of fretless bass that for some reason seemed really cool at the time.
Oh yeah, but it really works so well as a solo too. I just wanted to.
It does, yeah.
Oh, Crash. And of course we get into, well, these are my roots talking. These are
Nice.
90s gothic rock. So of course we had to. Actually, John didn't play guitar on this one. This is a synth guitar that's running through a soft amp. So.
Got kind of a dream theater thing going.
A little, yeah. Drums are not nearly as impressive. Portnoy can play the shit out of those drums.
Yeah, that's true.
I only added one little flourish in the solo because, I mean, it is the bass line, but it's cut up into little bits to make it fit with the whatever chords were going on underneath. I only added one little flourish, and it's the most amateurish pitch bend. That's it. And here we have the church. Crash's final resting place. How ironic. And it's, I mean, this in the game, this is like proper church organ, and I've always wondered who the hell is playing the organ. The church is empty. But it is kind of like a funeral march. This is just the main church thing. There's not a separate theme for when Crash is in there. Yeah. So what was the inspiration for this? Have you ever been to the church in New Orleans?
No, I never have, actually. But, I've been to a lot of cathedrals, and it always, seems like, especially in Europe, there's like always somebody somewhere playing a massive organ, and it's just like endless. In fact, it was funny, we were in York, England, and in the cathedral there, they have this huge pipe organ, and there's a plaque with all the organ players from like the 1400s on.
Whoa.
And one of them in the 1400s was Robert Holmes. And I thought, wow, that's cool.
I mean, you really got to flex the long sustained chords on this one.
Oh, yeah. Whenever I'm doing that kind of, organ / string, slow, resolving things, it's usually me leaning into the intro from Watcher of the Skies.
Oh, now we're into my familiar territory, yes. This is the screen that you're on for maybe a minute and a half in the actual game, and this tune is so pretty. that I usually just stand outside Malia's house like a stalker, just listening to the music instead of actually solving the puzzle.
It's probably representative because a lot of those early rooms and early tunes, the art director would give me a sketch, and I would write a song, not knowing how much was going to actually go on in that space, and so I would just write what I thought fit the space. But as you said, sometimes they didn't end up getting used a lot. But this is if you listen, this is me doing Procol Harum, I think.
This is the bit I really like when the chords suddenly start going up and it starts sounding a little hopeful, which ties in well to what Gabe is actually doing there. But it's also, now correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't analyzed this, but the chords that go underneath kind of still sound like the same chords that go underneath the main theme. So it is Gabe's theme with an extra solo on top, except for the bit where the chords start going up.
They're similar. I wouldn't say that they're exactly the same, but they have a similar kind of structure. And I think you could easily accuse me in a lot of my stuff of having, have these minor sections, and then there'll be a major hopeful section, which eventually resolves. And I tend to do that a lot, and so a lot of those tunes end up sounding like they're in the same family. They're not quite, the same thing.
No, but I meant that it reminds you so much of Gabe's theme because he's the focal point of that scene, and later down the line you reuse Malia's theme. In fact, okay, spoiler, we haven't gotten to that part yet, but there's the bit in the Voodoo Hound for in Africa when you get there, and I didn't know until I had a look at the MIDI file that Malia's theme is actually playing in the background of that. Like, whoa, where did that come from?
A lot of stuff like that. It's, in a way, it's kind of similar in a much simpler way than what you guys did here, where you're every once in a while you'd get an opportunity to try and do something a little subversive, a little, subconscious. And then sooner or later, somebody figures it out. But
well, it's been a real joy to go through these because I've gone through most of the Space Quest games, which are more like an orchestral or synth rock kind of thing, and this is it's actually more of my wheelhouse, to be honest, because it's more in the rock center, and also you seem to have an affinity for the same sort of resolves, the melodies, resolves, solos, that kind of stuff as I do, except of course you're a lot better at it than I am, but I just listen to that. I mean, you can almost picture him walking up the driveway with a bouquet of roses and with a little skip in the step. And then the minor bit comes in again when the butler tells him to fuck off. One of my favorite tricks.
A lot of that. A lot of those sort of hopeful sections, I really, I think they represent me probably the most because I'm a really blind optimist in general. I've been easily accused of that, so it always creeps into the music, I think.
How did you end up writing the music for a dark, gothic, neo-detective story?
Just happened to be dating the right person at the time.
Yeah, that'll do it. But I mean, the music fits so well.
That's always been one of the interesting things about Jane and I is that I'm kind of very light, and it come from that angle. And Jane, I mean, one of our first dates, she was like, hey, do you want to come over and watch autopsy videos? It was like, a whole different. So when you blend that between the two of us, it kind of makes this interesting third.
Yes. But it has, I mean, it would be very tempting to score Gabriel Knight with a bunch of mean synths and a bunch of overly dramatic, The Exorcist type stuff. But you went for a very, very melodic route, which I think gives it more of that sort of noir feel. It feels more like a 90s story with a, 50s or 60s soundtrack to it, actually. Interesting.
Well, that would make sense, given all my influences. And I do love, when it comes to film scores and things, I love when a score is not the expected genre, not the expected approach, and you sort of come up with these interesting juxtapositions, which I think somebody in one of the chats, I was saying to somebody, if you listen to this music by itself, it's kind of nice pop / prog rock. Doesn't really get really interesting until you put it in that relationship to GK and to the story and the experience. And then for some reason, it has a whole different resonance.
Yes, it takes on a more melancholic tone. Also because, at the heart, the first Gabriel Knight game is a tragic love story above everything else. People always get hung up on the voodoo lore and the family drama and all that stuff. But to me, it's always been about, it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet story, really. You got...
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And this is the Voodoo Museum music where Dr. John just lays a big fat plot dump on the player. And you said this was kind of like a throwaway tune.
It was, yeah. It was kind of like, can we do something a little bit ethnic in tone, but, not too specific. And, given time and the tools we had, that's where we ended up. But for me, that's one of the challenges about GK1 is that, one, we're in New Orleans and you want to sort of have some jazz. And I don't really do real jazz. I'm not a jazz guy. And also, obviously we had this ethnic sort of leg on the table that had to do with voodoo and all of that. And we tried to work in that realm as much as we could. But again, it's not really my forte. So they're interesting. They're almost sort of homogenized versions of...
Well, you got the tribal drums going, which is one of my favorite parts. And actually, and I've already told you this, but I have to tell someone again. The beat that starts this remix off is the actual tribal drums from the game, but played through the wrong OPL patch. One of my friends, Sam, just played the MIDI from the game through the OPL patch for Doom. Id Software's Doom, and that's what came out. So we sampled that and used that as sort of a backing beat throughout the whole thing.
Very cool.
And I might as well tell the other story, which is that the snare drum it's a 909, a TR-909 snare drum, and with a gunshot overlaid on it to sort of subtly hint at how Dr. John eventually gets shot at the end. Spoiler.
Nice.
But I'm really amazed you say this was sort of a, just knock it out, be done with kind of thing, because the lead stuff on this is really, really intricate and really good. Like, did you just jam along to the chords and just went, all right, that's it?
It was it was kind of spur of the moment, and just... all of the licks like that, they're kind of like the most predictable thing you could play. They just happen to, fit in pretty well.
Well,
and some of the rhythms that were going on in these more voodoo parts of the game. I think I mentioned before, Orpheus, who was one of the guys in the sound effects department, was a great rhythm player, drummer. And so he helped out on some of these textures, which made a big difference.
And I think this is the Hound 4, the African snake mound with the spook. To this day, I turned 42 this year. To this day, I still shit my pants when I get to that section. Those fucking golems, man, they.
Oh yeah.
Every time they
come
come
the
alive.
Low synth you got going.
Oh, but you had, like, when I was looking through the MIDI file, you had like the same stems playing on like 3 different instruments, like a deep saw and a deep string ensemble and a deep polysynth or whatever, just to give it that. But that little thing that I put in the warm pad section, that's actually buried somewhere deep in the Snake Mound file. That's Malia's theme. And I was like, I don't remember hearing that. I think I might have transposed it up an octave or two, but it's buried in there. And I always thought that's brilliant, because then it's not just Malia's theme, then it's her whole Bloodlines theme. It's actually Tedalo's theme, all that. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, that low synth thing, I love to do that when I can, because I remember going to early like Yes shows and Genesis shows in the 70s, and they would use these Moog bass pedals, and like Chris Squire would hit one of those bass pedals and the entire stadium would just shake from the low end. It was so cool.
Oh, that's so good. I love those. And John Paul and I usually joke that I can't go 5 minutes without popping in a low res synth that just goes. So there's a bunch of that on this record as well. In fact, there is one going on right now. We just put in a gate, so it's arpeggiated.
Nice.
And this is Malia's. And you even went for a 6/8 time, just to sort of give it that sort of. You can dance to this. You can slow dance to this.
It's true. It's true.
So Malia's theme. So obviously she's sort of the villain and also the love interest at the same time. So what kind of brief did you have for the music that she needed?
All I had was a sketch of her, and knowing, from discussions with Jane, who the character was going to be and how the relationship with Gabe was going to take place. So I just wrote to that portrait of her through a filter of Gabriel's romantic inclinations. So that's why, if you listen to it, it's a very romantic theme. It's very sort of whitewashed.
Yeah, but it's in minor key, and which is very interesting. And I think it is minor key anyway. I might be wrong actually, but it sounds like it is. And it is because, Malia is a tragic sort of figure. She didn't want to be in the position that she's in. It's, her whole family business and all that. So it's interesting that it has this sort of melancholy nature to it, even though it's in 6/8 time and slow and romantic. There's a little twinge of sadness to it.
True.
And now we're in the swamp. For some reason, Sierra couldn't get through a game without having to put in an impossible maze, but at least the music was good. Oh, cue guitar.
Nice.
And synth choir. This is John Paul's favorite track, probably because he plays the guitar.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, I still enjoy this track.
Yeah, traipsing through the swamp. Luckily, it doesn't get this intense in the actual game until you get to the voodoo ritual bit. But it has this sort of again, it's in 6/8 time, so you can slow dance to it. But there's a little. I always found a little twinge of when you go through the swamp. There's a twinge of menace to it. It's a little like, okay, I'm sort of going somewhere. I'm not entirely sure where it is I'm going. And the music is kind of. It's not overly ominous, but it's a little bit ominous. So I just cranked it to 11.
Like it. Well, it's an interesting. This is the kind of tune that kind of represents my usual shtick, which is, I'll write a very simple piece of music on piano, and then just like overproduce the shit out of it, and then add. Going back to the discussion about how bass can impact, the mood, add interesting bass choices in terms of the bass notes and the harmonics, which can add that darkness or that depth. And, you've got something, and its heart is really simple, but suddenly it has all this weight,
Yes. And we had to extend it, obviously. And it gives me a chance to play, on the cymbals, just crash cymbals all the time, which is... I used to play in punk rock bands when I was a teenager, so there's a lot of that.
Cool.
But I'm so happy that I got to play real drums, because there's one thing that's completely impossible to program your way out of, and that's the little ghost notes. I've always been a fan of ghost notes. And they're so tricky to get right if you're trying to program them.
And I think live drums, there's always this flam, which you can't get on programmed drums very easily. And it's just a little bit of hesitation or a little bit of splash or a little bit of air. Back in the day in the studio, we used to call flam. But
I mean, there is that story about if you put a metronome to 70s rock or even 80s rock, if you put a metronome to any Led Zeppelin record or something, they will speed up and slow down in terms, to reflect the intensity of the music. Certainly the Who music, which sometimes was to a click track, and you can just it was amazing stuff. I think this is the ritual music when you get to the ritual in the swamp, and I just had a hell of a time getting the drums to fit, because I couldn't work out what BPM this was in. It's in a weird time signature that I also can't figure out, so I just had to drum along to whatever I heard, and I couldn't quantize it, which also sucked. And actually,
that is a nice touch.
I actually ended up playing, because the first take I did on the drum pad was so bad that I couldn't use it. So I actually ended up playing it on the computer keyboard. So those toms are played on the computer keyboard.
Well, I have a philosophy that the best drum parts, at least for me, always take place on a steering wheel. I'm always playing when I'm driving.
That is absolutely true, yes. And there's the Potato Waltz. I don't know, did the tunes actually have titles when you were composing them, or did you just call them, castle, swamp, whatever? They were usually just called whatever room they were in. So was this one called Potato Room? No, I'm just kidding. How many potatoes does one castle... There's no one else there. How many potatoes does she need? But
you never have enough potatoes.
Never. But again, this is one of those transition scenes. You're on the screen for 10 seconds, moving back and forth from the bedroom to the chapel. And the music is... This is one of my favorite parts from bits of music from the game. And I used to just stand there and shut off the sound effects because of her chopping the fucking potatoes and just listen to the music instead.
I love all the arpeggiated stuff you've got going on.
Yeah. Because I can't go 5 minutes without a rest synth. And it is actually in waltz time, in 3/4. And it has that little Germanic feel to it.
This actually is based on a memory I had. One of the times Jane and I were in Munich, we went to the Hofbrauhaus, and they had a polka band playing, and this little historical, amazingly authentic, little pub where all of this German history had taken place. And they're playing stuff that felt like this.
What is your relationship and your and Jane's relationship with Germany? I mean, obviously, Gabriel Knight has a lot of connections to German history and such. Is there any particular reason why Germany fit in so much with Gabriel Knight?
Well, Jane had lived there for a couple of years when she was younger. And so when we started doing various travels together, that was one of the places that I hadn't been and she wanted to show me. So one of the first trips we ever took over to Europe, we did Munich and Salzburg and Vienna, all of that. And we just always loved Munich, especially around Christmas time. It's always really magical.
And the polka's not too bad.
That's right. The beer, too.
The beer, too, yes. Denmark is adjacent to Germany, so we get a lot of imported German beer. They know their stuff. The Dragon Dream. This... Well, it's if the African snake mound usually makes me shit my pants, this part always makes me go ooh, because there's a big huge cutscene coming up, and Jim Cummins, who does the voice of the dragon, just has this movie trailer voice that is butter to my ears.
He's great.
So of course we sampled the shit out of him, and this is I deeply apologize. This is one of those times where I took some really strong liberties and actually shoved in this sort of pseudo heavy metal riff coming up, because the original piece is timed to the cutscene, so I needed to toss something in there, but it's a little cheap heavy metal riff played on a saw wave. And every time John Paul gets one of these things, he just goes, "There's only bass in this. What am I supposed to do with this?" Because I don't pay attention to frequencies at all when I do stuff like this, and he's an expert at sort of unmuddying what I do. Usually what I hand him is muddy as hell.
There is a real art to that.
Yes. And I have no idea how he managed to separate out all that saw wave business going on right now, but he somehow did.
Yeah, that cutscene, and there are a few scenes in the game that actually I don't really consider musical pieces. They're more like sound design, and so they're sort of a second tier kind of thing.
But I love this, and this is the actual, now we're into the actual cutscene from the game. And what I really love about this is that the dragon theme and the New Orleans Voodoo Hound for Walking Around theme are very sonically similar. Like, I'm not going to say it's the same chord progression or anything, but they sound very similar. Yep. Might have overdone the distortion a little bit.
We were just watching something the other night. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it had an old Max Steiner score, and it was, it just confirmed my sort of behavior of coming up with maybe 10 or 12 main themes and then just, milking the heck out of them and using them, reusing them in different ways.
It's called leitmotifs. I mean, it is a tried and true mount.
Yeah.
Oh, but I also like how it's just the same 4 chords, but they keep building and building, and more and more layers get added on top until finally a knife appears out of nowhere. And you look at the original MIDI file, all the strings are just one stem.
Yeah.
So there's like a million notes all
everything
crammed
just
into one
gets-
stem. So I kind of had to separate those out a bit. I mean, how did because this obviously had to get translated into lower sound cards like OPL and Tandy and stuff. How I mean, if you layer like 3 million notes into one stem, those cards are gonna barf, aren't they?
Yeah, there were definitely times where it was difficult, especially with these games, to try and get the stuff down. To essentially 4 or 5 tracks. I can't always say that it succeeded, but that was one of the first things I did when I joined Sierra. I spent about a year and a half doing that for other guys' games. So it was a real education in how to think about that at the very beginning when you're doing the full tracks, and think about how they might thin down.
Yeah, just getting into the essence of the tune. What is essential? What is just overproduction? This bit here, I think these are just the same chords as when, the dragon is these low, ominous chords. These are the same chords, just played an octave higher and with a straight beat underneath, and it suddenly turns into late 90s rave dance.
Yeah, it's nice.
I mean, this is not something that I put in. These are the same strings that you programmed.
Well, that's the beauty of doing something 20 years ago, is you could just totally forget about it.
I mean, you got a lot of mileage out of, and also I have to say, when you start up the MIDI file, the Dragon Dream, it's just a power chord, and it's just like the first octave and 0 octave, and it just and the velocity is 127, and it's just yes.
Yeah.
It's mean as hell. I love it.
Yeah, that's one of the areas where, there were a few things in GK where the fact that we were trapped in so much repetition actually worked. Where we could take that time to just build it and build it and build it, and get away with it.
And it turns out that the silly heavy metal riff that I did actually fit over the chords that you programmed, so there's a little marriage of those two at the end. Long outros are fun, aren't they?
They are.
Right, so now we're up to the same interrogation music, but this time we're in the Voodoo Hound for distracting Dr. John. So we went for more of an industrial, dancey kind of thing. Still 7/8 though.
I like it.
And the working title for this one was the Hound 4 Hoedown. Which it doesn't have anything to do with the hoedown. It's just I always thought it was such a funny place to put a distraction puzzle, which is usually like reserved for a more lighthearted, like, oh, you need to get this guy away so you can steal something from them. But in this case, you're distracting a psychopathic murderer who likes to bash people's head against walls. And he falls for it. But every time I play this bit, also, when you're walking through that long hallway and if the timer runs out and Dr. John comes in from the other side, you just go, oh shit. Because Gabe is not in any hurry. He's just walking along.
Yep.
And this transition.
Yeah, this approach.
Oh, sorry.
I like.
Go ahead.
I like this approach to it. It's got a nice texture.
I almost cut it out actually because we already had the interrogation music once, but I thought it was such a different take on it that we put it back in. But I actually had John Paul make a separate version without the interrogation bit again. And now we're into what is probably my favorite theme from the whole game: the "oh shit, something is happening" theme. there's just something about especially the melody, the very, very simple melody that comes in just a bit, that just speaks to me for some reason. Probably helps that this is the most rocking theme in the whole game. This is the bit, that thing where it just climbs up and the lead goes down. There's just something about that chord and that lead together that just gets me.
I wanted that lead to almost have kind of a siren, kind of haunted siren feel to it.
And very melancholy also. Again, there's a lot of, I mean, probably because of the connotations you have when playing the game, but there's a sort of a twinge of sadness throughout a lot of I mean, this theme plays when shit's going down in the Voodoo Houndcore and when Uncle Wolfgang is about to perform open heart surgery on himself. So there is that there's something about that lead that just sounds sad in a way. Could just be me. So yeah, we took this to 90s goth industrial clubs territory.
Yeah, nice polyrhythms. I like it.
This is I think my main inspiration for something like this would be Frontline Assembly or one of those mid to late 90s industrial bands from Canada. My mic keeps dropping on me. There you go. Oh, and that's synth bass, which is also in the original. The octave bass that's just going like that. And I think the original is just a loop of like 30 seconds of this bit, so I just extended it to like 4 minutes.
Nice.
I should shut up because this is just... The noise beat. Oh yeah, I was going to say that. The noise beat, and it's very prominent here, but it's actually throughout the whole song, is actually your original drum stem.
Oh, wow.
Distorted terribly. And a lot of the sort of backing beats, sort of treble, high-end distorted stuff is actually your original drum programming.
Interesting.
I always get a kick out of the fact that the voice actress for Tedlow and Grandma Knight is the same person. She's so sweet as Grandma Knight, and as Tedlow, she's just spitting blood.
It's such a great voice cast. Yeah.
It is. I mean, anything Mark Hamill is in, I will gladly watch, but to have him, and again, this is very juvenile of me, but the first F-bomb in the game is when he says people are sick fucks, and I was just like... Oh, end credits theme, again, with apologies to Sir Holmes, the 90s prodigy breakbeats. It's very 90s rave. And it's not part of the original. But it does have the original almond break.
This tune was like an afterthought. You know, was the last thing that was done. And I remember working at Mark Siebert's house on it with him. And we had an argument about the snare drum because I wanted the snare drum on every beat.
Oh, yeah.
And he finally gave in, but I had to recite the history of Motown and every hit that Motown ever had before I could convince him.
Oh, yes. And even though I breakbeated this part, the snare drum on the first beat or on every beat is actually coming up in my favorite part of the of the end credits theme, which is, yeah, you'll see. You already know what it is. It's when it gets all triumphant on you. But yeah, like I was saying, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. The backing beat here is the original almond break, and I couldn't find a proper sample of it, and I only realized after I'd done this that most breakbeat artists only sample the first like 2 or 4 measures of the almond break.
Oh yeah.
I sampled all 8 bars of it, and it doesn't loop very well. But you can't tell.
I hate that, when you sample a beat and it's just not exactly right, and you don't find out until everything starts to drift, like, a minute later, suddenly everything's off.
Yeah. But if this tune is an afterthought, it is a phenomenal one, because it sort of encapsulates the entire journey you've just been through. Like, Gabe's main theme is this sort of, it's I'm a dark, brooding person, but I'm off to have an adventure kind of thing. And this it's half triumphant and half melancholy, in that he's just lost the love of his life, basically. But then again, he's now king of the castle. I exported all the voice lines from the entire game, and they're just numbered. So I went through all of them, and just to find Tedalo's little section, and just exported all of them, put them in. I love her voice. And that little I gotta tell you, that little offbeat. Oh, that's to a drummer, that's just. And here we come. Here comes the awesome bit. Well, not that the other bit isn't awesome, but this is the.
Yeah, I love these changes.
Oh, there's just something about this. Again, I don't know what it is, but there's something about the underlying chord progression and then that melody on top. They interact in a very, very, very pleasing way. I almost put drum and bass drums under this, but I decided no, I'm keeping the original drum pattern for this, because there's no improving it. So if the end credits theme was an afterthought, it was a really brilliant one, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's still one of my favorites. I really love that little section too, with the high part.
The pizzicato strings.
Pizzicato, yeah.
And now we get into the, strap yourselves in, the 14-minute long medley of tunes that people were going to yell at me if I didn't include on the album. Including now the way the main menu starts. Oh, did I tell you this piano lead thing was one of the first thing I learned to play on piano?
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Because at the time, I mean, I'm not a great piano player at all, and it turns out that it's all white keys. There are no black keys in it, so you can it was easy for me to play. And the whole reason why I actually did this, speaking of afterthoughts, this whole medley thing, which is on side D of the vinyl, was an afterthought. We'd actually finished the whole thing, 10 tracks, and I can't remember if it was, I think I just on a whim said, you know what, we need to have the St. George's Books theme in there, because I will get crucified if I don't include that. So I ended up just stringing together a bunch of tunes from the game that I wish could have, fit into a remix sort of situation or whatever. I just strung them into this huge project, and lo and behold, when the crowdfunding campaign went up, someone tweeted at me and went, "The St. George's Books theme isn't on the track list. That sucks." I was like, yes, it is. It's buried in the 14-minute medley somewhere.
Yeah, I think that actually was another afterthought where it was like, oh shit, we need something for the bookstore. And I just thought, well, okay, I'll do an alternate version of the main theme.
Which works. It's home. It's got this very home type feel to it. And I think a reason why a lot of these tunes that are in the medley now ended up in this medley, which the working title of it was just the Beatless Suite, because there's no percussion in it. All of the tunes in this medley are tunes from the game that also don't have very light percussion, if any. And it lent itself to this sort of epic, sort of Vangelis type, Mike Oldfield-ish almost, like long side of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like this section to me sounds like something from the movie Legend. That whole Vangelis.
I do love those sort of piano arpeggios, and they do remind me a bit of Genesis, actually, because he sure loves his arpeggios.
Oh yeah.
This is University theme, I think.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I should know this, but really. Yeah, and this is one of those sort of themes that you don't expect to be in the game. In fact, I don't think anyone expects that at some point you're going to have to go to a university and sit through a lecture in a game about voodoo. So it has this sort of academic, kind of Dead Poet Society vibe to it, actually.
That's true. I never thought of that.
And more. Do you know what? This might actually be Wolfgang's bedroom, now that I think of it.
Is it?
Yes. Shit, that's embarrassing.
Well, that's funny. Neither one of us knew.
Oh, you know what? It actually is, because the three themes that I strung together here are from the castle, the bits that are not potato related.
That makes sense.
Right, and this is the chapel. So I think the other one was possibly the library, actually. Oh god. Okay, I'm just gonna stop guessing now. Alistair's gonna watch this video and go, "You imbecile." So 2 chapel or churchy themes in one game. Which one is your favorite? Pick a child.
Oh, I think definitely that one.
Yeah,
More
I like that
interesting.
one too. And when I stuck all of these tunes on these MIDI files into the same project, obviously I reused a lot of the same synths, so it has the sort of cohesion. I didn't do a lot of transition between. Some of them are in different keys, obviously, so I just sort of crossed my fingers and hoped no one would notice that it suddenly shifted keys on you. But then again, it does the same in the game. I mean, when you change screens, all of a sudden, it just goes into another tune. This is the bedroom. All right, I'm up to speed again. the university theme isn't even on the album. All right. I wish I could edit that out now, but I can't because we're talking over the music.
Just makes us more human and less mythical,
Right. That is an interesting choice. That half step up. Just, I mean, the whole thing is very lilting, very soft, but that half step leading up is just a little jarring. You just go, what the hell was that? And yes, that is
it was probably an attempt to manipulate how the looping would happen.
Mm.
And I think actually, works in the opposite way. It actually probably made it, as you said, a little more jarring when it looped.
But I thought thematically it fit, because you're in this bedroom. It's supposed to be all lilting and nice and calm and soft, but there's something sinister going on in that castle. So there's just that little twinge, that little jab that goes like that. And yes, that was the Vangelis Blade Runner lead synth playing just before.
Nice.
I'm not even gonna start guessing what this part is. I think this is when you leave for Germany and you get on the plane. This is what plays. Which again is a lot of interesting chords put together. Are you familiar with the French band Air? They did a soundtrack for the movie The Virgin Suicides.
Yep.
Yeah, that has a lot of really interesting chords like that as well. And this bit always reminded me of that soundtrack.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense.
Oh, and there's that res. This is the middle part of the Mike Oldfield album, where he just, when the weed is kicking in and you just lean back.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, a lot of the things that sustain in that particular game, like the strings and the low synths and the bells, those are just kind of crutches for, holes in the piano playing. That it's like, okay, how can we kind of have a bed that will tie all of this together?
You say crutches, I say thematic linkage, sonic textures. It all works, and it gives it a sort of unifying sense. I mean, you can listen to this bit, which is just long Mark Snow-ish synth chords playing, and you can listen to something like this, and it has that same sort of vibe to it. I know what this one is. This is Magenta Moonbeam, aka Big Fraudster. Yeah. And it's the only one in the medley that has a little bit of percussion, a little bit of bongo going on in the background. What was your vibe for this character? I mean, I gotta confess, I've always hated this character. Because she's just every sort of valley girl ditzy bastard I've never wanted to speak to. What was your take on her?
I think I just wanted to try and amplify that she was probably not a critical character. She probably was, one of those great, if you think about like a Hitchcock film, one of those great characters that sort of comes and goes, and you sort of wonder, wow, why is that there? But I mean, obviously, she did have a key role in the game, but from early on, in terms of just writing to a sketch, she just didn't seem to have the same weight as some of the other characters. So
her tune is very danceable. I mean, she does do a snake dance, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's got that. And it does have that sort of hippie vibe to it. You can almost hear that tune being played in the park in a drum circle or something.
Yeah, that's funny.
And I think this is the tune when you come back from Africa and Germany or whatever. It all blends together.
This is the same ascension that we had before, but played in a different rhythm.
Oh, and there's that res synth again. But I like your use of chromatic percussion, which is a word I've only learned because that's what my dog calls them, bells and xylophones and stuff like that. Really interesting.
Back then we kind of had those 5 patches we could play with on the sound canvas that at the time seemed so freeing and so fun, but we didn't really have a lot of like we couldn't even use real drum machines yet.
Oh, you got a lot of mileage on. Oh, that's another thing about the drums that you programmed in there are actually, they sound like they're played by a real drummer. They have like little flourishes and all the crash hits and accents and stuff. Is I like that.
Well, most of those, and I still do drums this way most of the time, is I'll actually play them in instead of programming them. Which of course means a lot of surgery in terms of cleanup, but just try to put a little bit of feel in there.
Here's a story from my young days when I was in high school. I ended up being the drummer for the high school big band because the guy who could actually play drums didn't want to be there anymore, so I just sort of went in there. But then our music teacher found out that I could play drums on the keyboard, like you just said. F sharp is the hi-hat, C and D is the bass drum, and he actually had me do that instead because he was like, dude, you're terrible behind the kid, but you can actually play drums on the keyboard.
Right.
Like, but I want to play the real drums. And we go back to the St. George's Bookstore theme. Just so if people missed it the first time, it is on the album twice.
The funniest thing with this theme, one time Raleigh and I were at Disneyland. It was like a really packed day at Disneyland in the middle of the summer. And we were standing in this huge line for Pirates of the Caribbean or something. And all of a sudden I hear that theme. Somebody had it as their ringtone. I was like, I can't get away from this theme.
Well, what are the odds? Was this in the late 90s, like when the game, or mid 90s?
This was probably early 2000s.
Wow. Okay. Well, I thought all adventure game fans died out in the early 2000s. So
yeah, that's right.
That's good. Well,
all except 32 of them, I think, survived.
Yeah. I mean, Ron Gilbert famously said that adventure games never died. They just went on a holiday in Germany. Well, that's the end of the album. Wow. And it was a pleasure to work with this. I love the live feel and being able to mangle them into the sort of EBM industrialish thing. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our mutual friend Roberta Vaughn, who's actually suggested. Right. She suggested I do a remix for your remix competition. And I just sort of on a whim did the main theme, and because I was in the zone, I also did the Hound 4 Hoedown remix, so I did 2 for the price of 1. And then for some reason I just kept going. So she just sort of kickstarted something, and it spun out of control, and here we are, double vinyl.
She often does, yeah. Yep, she is the thread that connects everything in the universe these days, I think.
Yeah, but, she certainly is.
Yeah, it was so fun for me to hear it, and as you guys were working and you were sharing it, it's a great way to re-experience some of the stuff, and I really enjoy the care with which you do it.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's both a pleasure and an honor, and very humbling to have the original composer give a thumbs up, or at least just acknowledgement of what we do. I usually try to reach out whenever I do stuff like this. Usually try to reach out to the original composers, not for permission as such, because most of the times they don't own the rights to the music, but just to sort of I don't want to do something that they would think is disrespectful to the source material or something like that. So it's and this is one of those times when I've taken the most liberties with a soundtrack. So I'm doubly honored and humbled that you actually enjoyed it.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and there've been some amazing covers over the years, and a lot of great stuff that we've had submitted for the contest. And I remember even working on GK3, some of the in-house audio guys did a really funny cover of the main theme for GK3, where they had written lyrics that had to do with Grace and Gabriel's history, and it's just always fun. As a composer, it's fun to hear your music sort of take on new life.
Oh, that is well. I can't thank you enough, and thank you so much for sitting through this and doing this commentary with me. I thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks. Anytime.
So yeah, that's the Gabriel Knight Synths of the Fathers. It actually got funded by the skin of its teeth, so we will have a double vinyl of that, and we will have a couple of extra copies of it for sale when it goes. When it is pressed, we'll have like maybe 30 or 40 extra copies. So if you missed out on it, wait like 3 or 4 or 6 months or whatever. Obviously, if you're watching this in the future, like years ahead, this makes no sense whatsoever. Then I'm sorry, you're shit out of luck. But anyway, it's a privilege and an honor. And if you listened to this along with us and you absolutely hated every minute of it, then don't worry. Our good friend Alistair is doing a proper recording of the soundtrack that he also plans to put out on vinyl sometime in November of this year, 2022. So you will have the authentic soundtrack as well.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. And a sequel comes out this fall too, which will be probably 20-ish new tracks of GK style music. So hopefully folks will be into that.
I'm really looking forward to that. Congratulations on the Kickstarter campaign for that.
Thank you.
And always interesting to hear more music from you. Before we go, I almost forgot. I wanted to have John Paul in on this conversation. Unfortunately, he's in Chicago and he has a music store, so it's still open, so he couldn't make it. But he said to relay a message. Please pass on that I find it impressive and awesome that you have the ability to make something as basic as Adlib or Sound Blaster seem both gentle, thoughtful, and emotional. And that he's stoked for you to hear the aria that Sarah and him are working on. They're actually redoing the aria from GK2. Yeah,
I'm excited to hear that. In fact, I'm trying to find lyrics for Sarah. I know I've got them somewhere.
Yeah, but you would imagine Jane has them in the drawer, but we've been like joking. Maybe there's a rule around the house: don't talk about GK or something.
Well, what happens really is, we've made some pretty major moves over the years. And when we moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, we did a huge purge as we had just boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. And we probably should have held on to more of it. But
what are you going to do?
It was, too much stuff.
Right. Well, that is it. Once again, thank you. And
thanks, Ross.
I'll see you around the Chrono stream.